Welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight, the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink, bane of bullies, hero to small dogs and children. Among the many things the country is reassessing 9 days after the most remarkable presidential election in memory is how so many of us in the media got it so wrong. Virtually every person with a high-paying job in Washington, New York, and Los Angeles demanded that voters not support Donald Trump for president, but they did it anyway, and we never saw it coming. Why is that? Joining us now to unravel the mystery is New York Times columnist and two-time Pulitzer Prize winner Nick Kristof. His latest column is entitled 12 Steps for Voters in Despair. Nicholas Kristof, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
So you've got this new column out, 12 Steps for people who are traumatized, as you say, by the election. And I won't go through all of them, but it's a sample: volunteer to fight Islamophobia, join the ACLU, donate to Planned Parenthood, take on sexism and misogyny, sort of all the stations of the cross of lifestyle liberalism. But there's no number 13, which is assess why this happened. Think deeply about why an event you didn't predict came to pass. Why not?
Well, actually, that is within the 12. One is to get out of our echo chambers. And so to follow people on Twitter or Facebook who do not agree with you. Make sure that you have friends who disagree with you profoundly. Because if you have a friend who voted for somebody else, if you're a Clinton supporter, if you have friends who voted for Trump, it's harder to demonize that person.
But there's no suggestion of why people might have voted for Trump. Now, I read your column, so I know. I think it was in September you had this piece where you said, look who's endorsing Trump, who's behind him. You said it's the North Korean government, it's Islamic terrorists, it's the Klan, it's the American Nazi Party. It seemed very uncharitable to me. There was no room for people who are decent but economically beleaguered to maybe want to support him.
Oh, no, I mean, it's absolutely. It's a point I've made repeatedly, because my hometown, I'm from rural Oregon, Yamhill County, Oregon.
Right.
A farm 4 miles out of a town of 1,000 people. And that town is overwhelmingly pro-Trump. And it's, I mean, I believe my friends and neighbors there are misguided. I think they're not going to get what they hope for. But they feel betrayed by the Democratic and Republican establishment. The economic base of that area used to be manufacturing and logging, and that went away, and they feel nobody has been speaking to them, and finally Trump has spoken to them.
But I don't notice any sympathy for them in your column. So if you're writing a column that says the people who are for Trump are Nazis and Klansmen and North Korean dictators...
No, I mean, I said precisely the opposite. I said that one can't stereotype Trump voters any more than one can stereotype anybody else. That was in that column right there.
But wouldn't it be useful to explain the factors that actually allowed this to happen? Like, for example, their frustration over the absolute shrinking of the middle class, the heroin epidemic, things like that. I don't see any of that.
No, but I actually had that in the first column after the election. That, for example,
I read it.
Since 1978, for the bottom half of the wealth distribution, male median wages have actually gone down. And I think that's a crucial reason. You know, that if you're a male worker, your median wages since 1979 have actually gone down.
I'm very aware. I guess what I'm looking for is empathy. So you've traveled all around the world, famously to the worst places in the world: Darfur, Mogadishu, Ouagadougou. I'm sure.
Yeah,
probably
absolutely.
to those places much more than Modesto and Lewiston, I would imagine. I've never read a column by you that suggests the people in those places who support dictators oftentimes are racist or bad people. You would never write that about a poor person in the third world. But you're implying that about your fellow Americans.
No, I'm not, Tucker. If you look at my columns, I precisely said we have to avoid that it's important not to stereotype Trump voters. I've been taking abuse on that from my fellow liberals because, I mean, these are ideas that I believe in very powerfully, but I also think it's important not to demonize Trump voters.
Really? Because the American Nazi Party and the KKK don't really exist in a meaningful sense. They may have an office or a website, but they're not tens of thousands or millions of members.
Look.
And when you tie Trump supporters to those groups, that's a slur.
No, it's not. I mean, I think that Trump is, frankly, a bigot. I think he has a racist history. I don't think that of his supporters. And I mean, his supporters from my hometown, I understand that suffering. I've written about it repeatedly from my town.
And what solutions have you proposed?
You know, I think it's hard, but I think education has to be at the heart of it. I don't think it's something that one can...
Well, they have schools. What does that mean, education?
I think that we underfund education for the people who most need it, that essentially affluent people in the New York suburbs get good education. In Yamhill, I don't think you get a good enough education. I think we also have to...
And you really think it's all about funding? Do you think there's evidence of that? There's social sciences support the more you spend, the better result you get?
I think it's complicated and you can't pour money into a broken system, but I do think that money levels matter. I also think you need to create jobs, frankly. And maybe that will be...
What kind of jobs?
So, I mean, there is pretty good social science evidence on things like career academies to present the most at-risk people and provide them with apprenticeship jobs that lead to a career. It saves money over the long term. And this is not an area that I'm not a labor economist.
But that's kind of the point I guess I'm making. I'm not trying to be mean, but you've written a lot about climate change, for example.
Yeah.
You're really concerned about it. You've thought a lot about it. You've thought a lot about the suffering of people in other countries. Doesn't seem like you've thought that deeply about the suffering of your fellow Americans. You don't have the solutions you have for, say, global warming. And my question is, isn't it always easier for the elites to identify with abstractions or poor people in other countries and kind of ignore their own countrymen? I've noticed this. Have you noticed that?
I mean, I think that is I guess I'd say two things. I mean, I think that is a real problem, and I think that there is a problem in journalism that we favor lots of diversity but not economic diversity.
Yeah.
And that in whether it's Fox News or the New York Times or the Washington Post, we don't have enough folks who grew up in working class or rural communities.
Yeah. Well, we actually have, and I definitely don't want to make you defend your employer. No one should have to do that.
Right. But I would
a
also,
sincere question. Do you know anybody in the New York Times who's openly pro-life?
Yes, absolutely.
You do?
I do. And
what percentage would you say are?
I don't know. But I do. I mean, I would make the point that I've written repeatedly about the working class issues in Yamhill, Oregon, and
right. But I mean, out of
13,
none of them was, hey, comfortable, smug people on the Upper West Side. Like, think about why people would have voted for the guy. That's not one of the prescriptions. Giving to Planned Parenthood?
Absolutely, absolutely. Two of them are precisely about that, and I'd encourage people to go and nytimes.com, read this column, and you can see for yourself
you say get out of your bubble, but
I will avoid demonizing people who don't agree with me about this election, recognizing that it's as wrong to stereotype Trump supporters as anybody else.
You just tied them to the Klan and the Nazi Party.
Not at all. No, that's completely unfair reading of this.
Well.
And I encourage people to check for yourself and read for themselves.
Please do. Check for yourself. Nicholas Kristof, thanks a lot for joining us.
Sure. Good to be with you.
I appreciate it.
Good to be in the lion's den.
Thank you. Not much of a lion. Well, the world waits for key personnel announcements out of Trump Tower. Fox News correspondent Doug McKelway is in Midtown Manhattan with the latest on that. Doug, what's going on?
Hi, Tucker. Well, some big things here today, and a sign that Donald Trump really is reaching out to his former detractors. The transition team made a remarkable announcement that Donald Trump will be meeting with Mitt Romney at the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey this weekend. Apparently, Mitt Romney is up for consideration as Secretary of State. And in another sign of the healing that's going on around here, Trump just wrapped up his first meeting with a foreign head of state, meeting with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan. Apparently, this meeting lasted 90 minutes, a remarkable figure given the comings and goings, the frequency of comings and goings around here. And also, remember what Donald Trump said about Japan during the campaign, often threatening to yank U.S. military protection of Japan unless it contributed more to its own defense. He also accused Japan of manipulating its currency, and he also opposes the TPP, which Japan favors and Abe favors. But Prime Minister Abe apparently gave as good as he got. He mounted a charm offensive. He sent a message to Donald Trump immediately after his election victory, citing his extraordinary talents. Meanwhile, another cattle call here at Trump Tower today with a who's who of movers and shakers making their way in to see the president-elect. Here's Sean Spicer of the RNC.
You look at the quality and caliber of the folks that come in and out of this building over the last 48 hours alone. You get a sense of what kind of person Donald Trump is and the kind of people that are attracted to him. World leaders, people who are visionary, people who have gotten things done. Fred Smith, Nikki Haley, Secretary Kissinger, Senator Jeff Sessions, Admiral Mike Rogers. These are people at the top.
And meanwhile, the transition team continues to push back hard against reports of disorganization.
I've been in on these meetings. I'm on the executive committee, and what we're seeing is a very orderly group of people working on behalf of the American people.
Aides also announced another step forward with the addition of landing teams. These are people with special expertise in government agencies who will be descending on Washington. The first team to land there will be the National Security Landing Team with stops at the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, the Secretary of State's office, and also the National Security Administration. Tucker, back to you.
Well, Doug, it's great to see you tonight. Thanks a lot. Well, here's something new. In the past 24 hours, many on the left have stepped up demands that companies like Facebook, Google, and Twitter, the companies through which almost all of your news flows, censor so-called fake news. That is, stories that some believe helped Donald Trump defeat Hillary Clinton. Such politically counterproductive writings should not be allowed, they argue, a point that the Chinese authorities have been making for many years. President Obama weighed in on the controversy today during a trip abroad to Germany, clearly siding with the censors. Watch this.
If we are not serious about facts and what's true and what's not, and particularly in an age of social media where so many people are getting information in sound bites and snippets off their phones, if we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems.
That's right. The politician-in-chief lecturing us about propaganda. So should the government and media giants begin clamping down on information they think might hurt the Democratic cause? Here now is Jessica Tarlov, a Democratic strategist, and Kristen Tate, a contributor at The Hill, and it is great to see you both. Ms. Tarlov, I will start with you.
Shocking.
So one person's fake news is another person's news. And the idea that these media giants, who really have more control over the information we receive than anybody's ever had in history, way more than William Randolph Hearst ever had, are going to start deleting things because they think they're, quote, fake, should scare all of us, shouldn't it?
Well, I think that censorship is obviously something that we need to take incredibly seriously, especially as we,
By take seriously, I mean we should be against it, just period, right?
Well, yes, I do believe that, but I do think that we do need to make a concerted effort to make sure that we are getting good, real news. I mean, this is...
Who's we in that?
The American populace, the world populace, even those in China deserve good news that's accurate. And I think what President Obama is talking about, I mean, first of all, he's frustrated, right? And he's been frustrated throughout the campaign because he's felt like it's been a factless, vortex that Donald Trump has created where he said things off the cuff and gotten away with it, whereas Hillary Clinton has kind of gotten slammed for all of this. And we've debated this over and over again, and she lost and he won, and I get that. But when you have people like, I believe his name is Pete Horner, this guy who's now bragging about all the fake news that he put out through the election cycle, like he's responsible for that story that there were protesters paid $3,500 to go to Trump rallies. And he said it's completely fake. If you look at the link, it's abcnews.co, not .com. And Kellyanne Conway retweeted it. Corey Lewandowski did. And if people aren't being smart about the news that they're consuming, I do think we have a problem.
I guess there are two tracks here, Kristen. One is the idea that people didn't vote for Hillary because they just didn't know enough, because they're dumb. And that's the implication of what the left is saying, and the president just said. But the idea that Facebook or Google or Twitter could remove things without our knowledge, shouldn't that get us up in arms?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a libertarian, and I think we need to let the market decide what is worthwhile and what is not. The actual fake news sites, they will lose credibility and eventually their audience.
When will Alex Jones lose credibility?
Well,
when is
there's an audience. There's an audience for Alex Jones. Look, we need to let everything get posted. Otherwise, it's going to be up to Facebook or some other institution, or worse, the government, to decide what fake news is. The problem, Tucker, is that it's a very slippery slope to define fake news. For example, is a climate change denier promoting fake news? We got to let the people decide. Markets work. This kind of governing and sort of censorship does not work, and we've got to trust the people. The people are intelligent, and markets work.
Well, it's kind of worked for, I don't know, thousands of years. I would say
it's a different age, though.
Okay, it's a different age. I would say this, but to get a lecture from a guy who told me right to the TV screen that no, the government did not read my emails, had no capacity to read my emails. Okay, that was a lie. That the IRS was not actually punishing his political enemies. Lie. I mean, I could go on and on and on. For a politician who lies, because they all do, to lecture me about fake news is just too much, no?
I don't know. Listen, I only have a few more days left of Barack Obama, so I'm taking it all in, and I'm going to smile about it.
Okay.
But I understand. I totally take your points, and I understand the concern about this and getting a lecture from someone about this who's, an ideologue at best, right? And he's lecturing. He's going around the world and he's lecturing about it. But for you to say that you're comfortable with fake news getting posted, that's okay,
Tucker,
when you know that...
Define fake for me.
This is about, well, you can't define fake. That's the problem. What this is about is left-leaning mainstream media blaming conservative media for losing the election, losing credibility, and losing readers. Their definition of fake news is anything that doesn't align with their leftist agenda. If you look at the blacklist of fake news sites that's being circulated by New York Magazine and others, it includes all conservative sites, and some of them are not even fake, Tucker. It includes things like Michelle Malkin's Twitchy, that's on there, Breitbart News, IJ Review. So, this is all about conservatives waging war on, liberals waging war on conservative media, and we would not be having this discussion if Hillary lost the election.
We're almost out of time. Jessica, I just want to ask you a question. Do you really trust the teenage billionaires over at Twitter to make these kind of decisions? I mean, I would think liberals would be suspicious of this level of concentration of power.
I think that they are suspicious of it fundamentally, but I think that they're more suspicious of these kinds of stories that are coming out.
Of the free exchange of ideas. Right. That's really scary.
But when you say that, it's just fake news. You can't pinpoint what it is. It's things that are a lie. Like that these protesters were.
The jokers will always get called out. That's how the market works. Whenever I see my friends post fake news, all the comments below it are pointing out that it's fake and even making fun of the friend who posted
BuzzFeed did a study that there was, I think it was 9 times more engagement with fake news on Facebook than there was from the other 18 real media news outlets, right? With the New York Times.
The day we allow BuzzFeed to define what real journalism is the day that I start selling aluminum siding.
Well, I can't wait to see that happening.
Thank you so much. Jessica Kristen, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, now it is time for Twitter Storm, our nightly trip through the social media landscape. It takes us to Arizona, where actress Lena Dunham is riding out her post-election depression in the rarefied resort city of Sedona, of course. The emotionally incontinent Clinton supporter says she has, quote, asked the canyon for some guidance, and we're quoting again now, whispered some wishes into the big red rock as she copes with Donald Trump's election. Twitter has some thoughts on her escape into the wilderness. David tweeted this: didn't the rocks guide her to Hillary in the first place? Damn rocks. Jim says, a key reason I voted for Trump in the first place was so that Lena Dunham would flee to Canada. Oh, well. And Coretti said this: try going further south into Mexico, then you'll be out of Trump's territory. And by the way, can I just note, none of the people fleeing the country actually want to go to Mexico. They all want to go to kind of less diverse places, like Scandinavia and Canada. I don't think they're so into diversity in their personal lives. Just my observation. That's tonight's Twitter Storm. All right, up next, the refugees flooding into Germany from the Middle East may be proving Donald Trump right on at least one level. There's a new report out about what's going on in refugee camps there, and it's ominous. Don't miss it. Also, an American college student from Ohio now being held hostage in North Korea. What is the Obama administration doing to get him out? Here's a hint. Absolutely nothing. Kimberly Guilfoyle, here ahead. Well, Donald Trump took a lot of abuse on the campaign trail this last year for suggesting stricter screenings for immigrants and refugees coming to America from the Middle East. The smug left denounced him as a bigot, but did he have a point? A new report from an aid worker on the scene in Germany suggests migrants at one refugee camp there are preaching, quote, pure hatred towards Christians and are hoping to bring Islamic rule to that country. An anomaly? Here now is terror expert Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, thanks a lot for joining us. Are we drawing too many conclusions from this story, or is this a representative story, do you think?
Well, first, can I congratulate you on your show, on the ratings, and on your haircut? All excellent.
All except the last.
Thank you. Look, this is the missing piece of the puzzle that we've been worrying about for the last few years with this inordinate refugee stream going into Europe. This is the idea of what some people have called stealth jihad. Right now, it's only one person, but it's a person who has some credibility. Why? Because she's a former refugee herself. She's somebody who arrived in 1991 and now decided to give something back by helping her fellow refugees. And if you listen to what she's saying, it's very, very disturbing, Tucker.
So I want to take the impulse behind the Trump policy prescription seriously, whether or not you agree with the details. There is a problem with assimilation of Islamic refugees in Europe and Scandinavia, a real problem. I think everyone acknowledges that. Are you familiar, having spent a lot of your life in Europe, of any country that has successfully assimilated large numbers of Muslim refugees? And if so, how'd they do it?
Absolutely, but I'm talking about the period when my parents arrived in Europe, so in London, in the UK. My parents were refugees, Tucker. They weren't Muslims, but they were taken in after the revolution of 1956. Right. In that period, the 50s, the 60s, and 70s, there was assimilation. It doesn't matter whether you came from Pakistan, Hungary, Bangladesh. You wanted to be a Brit. You wanted to be a German. The trouble is what we're seeing now, Tucker, is the sour fruit of 20 years of immigration policy where they said everybody's welcome and you don't have to assimilate. You can have Bradford become a hyper-Muslim, intolerant area. You can have Marseille become a den of extremism. It's a consequence of political decisions, Tucker, that we have these areas today in Europe that are where the Brussels bombers hang out and recruit their buddies.
It seems so masochistic, almost suicidal, but that does seem the point. If you bring people from a culture where hating Christians and Jews is taught in the schools, you do have some obligation to try and deprogram them when they get to your country, don't you? Why don't we do that in the West?
Because there has been this mantra for the last 25 years that all cultures are equal. And as a result, you're not allowed to say, hey, you want to be a Brit, you want to be a German, this is what it means. That became anathema, and that's why Europe is where it is today. And that's why Trump resonated so much, because the average American knows this is crazy. It goes against common sense to say all cultures are equal. I'm sorry, female genital mutilation is un-American. We don't accept it, and I think the average American understands that too.
Well, it's certainly a crime against women, and you'd think the feminist groups would mention it once in a while. But that would require, in order to ask people to buy into your values, you'd have to believe in your own values first, wouldn't you?
Oh, didn't you just nail it, Tucker? You cannot have a healthy nation unless you embrace the values of the nation. For America, it's the founding principles of our founding fathers. In the UK, it's the Magna Carta. In Germany, it's Teutonic Knights, whatever. But if you can't embrace your history, then you will lack the antibodies to deal with people who want to subvert your culture.
I think that's really smart and obvious, but thank you for saying it. No one else does. Dr. Gorka, thanks a lot for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Well, there's another story. It looks like Louis Farrakhan and one of his proteges will wind up becoming the next chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Is this the direction the Democratic Party will be taking? We'll ask one insider coming up. Well, here's another story the press ought to be all over, but isn't. A UVA student, University of Virginia student, an American from Ohio, is being held captive in North Korea. 21-year-old Otto Warmbier was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for, quote, hostile acts against the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. Translation, he stole a political propaganda poster to keep as a souvenir in January on a school trip. What, if anything, is being done by the U.S. government to bring him home? Joining us now is our old friend, the co-host of The Five and all-around savant, Kimberly Guilfoyle, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello,
hello. It's great to see you. So I mean, obviously, you have a legal background. You worked for the government as a prosecutor. He's an American citizen being held hostage. Nobody ever mentions it. Why isn't the president giving a primetime address about this or pushing the Chinese?
Well, this is the problem. But we've seen over the past 8 years with this administration, very little effort to try and rectify outrageous, horrific wrongs like this. This is an American citizen. We should be devoting every resource possible to get him back to safety into this country. Can you imagine the feeling he must have of being abandoned by his country, like he doesn't matter? We're more concerned about keeping illegals in than getting our citizens back. To me, is just really unbelievable.
Well, that right there, the word citizen is the key. I mean, by the way, I've covered a bunch of these, and sometimes there are facts that will sketch you. You're not exactly sure what happened. The country claims he was a spy. Maybe he was. Who knows? This kid, not a spy.
Right.
He didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing weird here. He just took a poster off the wall like college kids do, and he's doing 15 years for it. Citizenship, being an American citizen, doesn't seem to get you anything.
Well, it doesn't seem to get you much safety and security to be able to, that they would in fact fight for your liberty and your freedom and bring you back to this country. It's appalling, because I'll tell you, I think it's a big difference between what's done in this administration and what would be done in past administrations, and hopefully in President-elect Donald Trump's administration, that something like this wouldn't be tolerated, and we also wouldn't be paying out money to Iran and doing bad deals with them like we've been doing. It's really unbelievable.
It is kind of weird, this instinctive genuflection before people who hate us and the unwillingness to stand up for our own allies, and in this case, children. But it also seems like what a coup it would be. How easy would it be for the State Department to say to China, North Korea is a client state of China, fix this. Like, do it now. Okay, we're demanding this. Then the president can announce, we sprung this kid, this hostage. Why
you would think it would be such a positive, a win-win. Number one, it's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Number two, it would look good. So maybe they care about that. But instead, they're like too busy. So there's people like this, that are forgotten, that are expendable to this administration. And that shouldn't be the case. If you are an American citizen and you are in harm's way, regardless of where you are in the world, you should be made whole and brought back and be safe. Like that, resources should be committed.
And what a shock to find out you're not. I mean, I'm much older than you, but when I was a kid traveling abroad, you always thought, if you really got into trouble, I'm an American.
Right.
Okay, it's not a license to break the law, but it is an assurance that like someone big and powerful is looking out for you.
Cares and is going to come get you.
Kinda.
And be there to like bring you back and make sure you're safe. That you're not going to be the victim of an international injustice and be locked in a prison and forgotten and treated horribly and beaten and humiliated and left behind like you don't matter. That to me is appalling. And we've seen multiple examples of this over the past 8 years that are just, horrendous to me. I wouldn't pay Iran a dime unless they had already given all the hostages back, I mean, the whole thing was just, to me, it's sending the wrong message internationally, and it's telling others around the world that American lives don't matter.
Yeah, and it's telling us that. I'm canceling my spring break to Damascus this year because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, there's just no negotiation with these bad people.
Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Tucker.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Congrats on your show.
Well, sanctuary city funding may be on the chopping block under a President Donald Trump. Mayors of some of those cities, however, have vowed to continue as sanctuaries for illegal immigrants. Not surprisingly, the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, is one of those voices, but his rationale is surprising. Listen to this.
Chicago has in the past been a sanctuary city. Took that executive order and made it an ordinance. To be clear about what Chicago is, it always will be sanctuary city. To all those who are, after Tuesday's election, very nervous, there's filled with anxiety has been spoken to. You are safe, Chicago. You are secure in Chicago, and you are supported in Chicago.
You're safe and secure in Chicago. That may be something of an overstatement because so far this year, 2016, there have been 643 murders in that city and many thousands of shootings, rapes, and robberies. It's one of the highest crime rates in America. The good news is Mayor Emanuel will no doubt find a way to keep those illegal immigrants safe because they're too important. Not like they're citizens or something who've lived here for generations. All right. What's next? It's a question we plan to answer regularly on a bunch of topics, but tonight it means what's next for the Democratic Party. Because before last week's election, virtually everybody predicted it would be Republicans in a death spiral, a civil war, pick your cliche. Of course, the opposite happened, and the rest of us are still trying to figure out what that means. Is it Keith Ellison's party now? Joining us now is Democratic strategist and deep insider, Julie Roginski.
Deep insider.
So, Julie, Keith Ellison, I don't want to pile on, probably the most liberal guy in the House, a former protege of Louis Farrakhan's, not a mainstream character, and yet he's gotten the public endorsement of Harry Reid, the outgoing Senate Majority Leader, and then Chuck Schumer, the would-be Senate Majority Leader, has also endorsed him. What does that tell us about where the party's going?
I don't think it tells us much. I think there are different factions in the party. I think the party is in disarray, as you pointed out. I think they're trying to find their way. Keith Ellison represents one wing of the party. Look, you have somebody like Chuck Schumer who represents a very different wing of the party, despite the fact that he endorsed him. And the Democrats need to find a way forward. Look, there are two schools of thought here. One school of thought is to do what Mitch McConnell did, which is to say he wanted to make Barack Obama a one-term president. That was his priority as majority leader.
Yep.
It's the same priority potentially for Chuck Schumer to say, I'm going to obstruct Donald Trump every step of the way. The other alternative is you work with Donald Trump when you can on infrastructure spending, which I think Democrats would be behind him on. I'm not so sure about conservative Republicans who don't want to dime on infrastructure spending. And you oppose him on other issues where you can. For example, this proposed Muslim registry, which I will register as a Muslim tomorrow if they start doing that.
But they're not. They're not going to come to terms on infrastructure. They're going to put a poison pill in there. That's not good for them.
No.
Let's be totally real. But let me just ask you, let's just savor the irony for 1 second. Chuck Schumer, Harry Reid spent the last year telling us in every sentence that Donald Trump's a racist, he's a bigot. And they just endorsed a guy who was supporting the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan. So can we just at least pause and say, wow? No?
Well, as I said, if Donald Trump has his way, Keith Ellison might be in that Muslim registry, so he will have his vengeance.
So look, the autopsy is obviously not complete. We're all trying to figure out what exactly happened, what next for the party. But you got to think that identity politics, which Hillary Clinton doubled down on, I'm the first woman, all this, et cetera, didn't really work, actually. And maybe it's a dead end that leads to tribalism in the end. Well, do you see the Democratic Party pivot toward economic populism instead, do you think?
Well, there's two options here, right? One is economic populism, as espoused by Bernie Sanders. Yeah. The other is to say that the Obama coalition, which was very successful in 2008 and 2012, just didn't come out for Hillary Clinton. And that coalition may potentially come out for the next Democratic nominee, whoever that person may be. So that's the tension in the Democratic Party now. I don't have an answer to that yet, but I think that's what they'll be working through. The third option is to do a little of both, is to say that we need to address the concerns of millennials. We need to address the concerns of minorities who stayed home. We need to make sure that they understand, as Latinos might, who voted more for Donald Trump, surprisingly to me, than they did for Mitt Romney, that their issues may not be represented by this president. But a lot of it will also depend on what Trump does. Look, Trump has an opportunity now Trump can do things like infrastructure spending, which I think would attract a lot of Republican support, Democratic support, attract the support of working class people who want to work on those projects, union labor people. Or he can side with the Republicans who don't want to spend an extra dime on infrastructure spending and potentially not do that.
He's made it really clear. So last question, quickly.
Yes.
Democrats have actually lost a historically large number of seats under this president. I mean, not just in federal seats, but in state houses. I mean, they don't control anything, really. That's Obama who did that.
Yeah.
Is anybody saying that out loud in the Democratic Party?
Well, a lot of people are saying that. Obama.
I haven't heard anybody say that.
Well,
yeah,
I'm saying Obama is saying that because Obama is doing something that I think is very important, which is he's going to focus on getting back the state houses. That's where redistricting comes in. Don't forget, congressional districts are determined by people in the state house. So to me, a priority in 2020 is to make sure we have the legislators in place to be able to do redistricting and hopefully get the House back.
Good luck. I wouldn't put Obama in charge of it.
Well, I would put Obama in charge of it. You know, he and Eric Holder, they might have some stuff up their sleeves.
I think so. Great to see you, Julie.
Great
Thank
to
you
see
for doing that. Well, how will Vladimir Putin and President-elect Donald Trump get along? Will they be friends, as Mr. Trump promised? Garry Kasparov, the chess legend and anti-Putin activist, joins us next. One question to come out of the 2016 election is, what would U.S.-Russia relations look like when it was over? Well, President-elect Trump has said nice words about Vladimir Putin in the past. The two spoke on the phone last week. Today, President Obama gave Mr. Trump some advice while speaking in Germany.
My hope is that the president-elect coming in takes a similarly constructive approach, finding areas where we can cooperate with Russia, where our values and interests align, but that the president-elect also is willing to stand up to Russia where they are deviating from our values and international norms.
So joining us now is Garry Kasparov, one of the most famous chess players in history, and also a longtime anti-Putin activist. Garry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
So I don't think anyone disagrees with the idea that Putin is an authoritarian. He clearly is.
He's a dictator.
He's a dictator. Why should human rights abuses within Russia dictate our posture toward Russia?
Now, first of all, this is I hope that President Trump will not continue so-called constructive Obama's policy towards Russia, because it was a disaster.
Yes.
And for 8 years, Putin grew up, from authoritarian leader to a dictator. Now, forget Russia for a moment if you don't want to talk about human rights and democracy, which I think is a mistake, but still, look at the Russian neighbors and even at the Middle East. Putin is a dictator who made his aggressive foreign policy agenda a core of domestic propaganda.
Yes.
Whether you want to make friends with Putin, he still has to survive. It's his only item in his agenda. And to survive in Russia when economy is in trouble and it's not going to improve anytime soon, so he's relying heavily, maybe exclusively, on his confrontation with the United States and the free world.
Right.
And defying U.S. president is a top priority. Now he sees another chance. If President Trump decides to go for grand bargain, that's for Putin is a big opportunity to reshape the map. And to throw away all the limitations and restrictions imposed in Europe on Soviet Union after World War II. And I think it could be a huge mistake if instead of reassuring our American allies, traditional American allies, Donald Trump starts, courting Putin.
So here's how I think President-elect Trump sees it. He looks at Putin and he says, who's the biggest threat to him? Islamic extremists.
It's wrong.
But this is the way Trump sees it. And what's the greatest threat to the United States? Islamic extremism. Why shouldn't we be on the same side of that question?
First of all, Putin is not fighting Islamic extremists. Let's not fool ourselves. Putin has been destroying Assad's opponents.
Yes.
Putin's goal in Syria was and is, to make sure that his crony, his client, the butcher Bashar al-Assad stays in power. And by the way, supporting Putin or allying with Putin in the region means, propping up Assad, who already said Trump could be a likely ally.
Right.
It's horrible. I mean, Assad, views President-elect as a potential ally. But by the way, it will help Iran. And Iran is another threat, and I think it will be very difficult to reconcile two items in the agenda, to curb Iranian ambitions and at the same time propping up Assad's regime.
Well, I think that's a very reasonable point. But from the perspective of a lot of Americans, they say, well, wait a second. Assad, clearly a bad guy, joins Putin in that, but also fighting a series of wars against Islamic extremists.
He's not fighting Islamic extremists. Let's not mislead your audience. Assad is fighting rebels that have nothing to do with ISIS. Maybe some of them are also bad guys. But ISIS, is being fought by Kurds, by Iraqis, supported by Americans. Maybe somehow Turks were behind it. But neither Putin nor Assad fought them.
So, I mean, it's unfair, you think, to see Assad as a secular leader who kept a multi-religious society together until he was weakened.
Every dictator in the Arab world, for some time could hold these, different, ethnic groups and religious groups together. It's over, It's a new world, and the greatest threat to American interest is the collapse of the traditional alliances.
Exactly.
And now it just is, instead of looking at the Middle East, by the way, where American military just has been doing a good job by actually pushing ISIS, and I think the war will be won fairly soon. Now, President Trump should look at NATO and to make sure that the Baltic states, Poland, Eastern Europeans, and NATO allies, and by the way, across Pacific, Japan and South Korea, they'll be reassured that America is still a leader of the free world.
I think that's a fair point. Mr. Capstraw, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for
inviting me. It was really interesting. Up next, Megyn Kelly live on the set. You'll have to keep watching to find out what that segment's about. Don't go away. Well, each night near the end of the show, we plan to bring you a segment called The Friend Zone, where we invite one of our friends within the building here at Fox News onto the set. And tonight, we're honored to have Megyn Kelly, host of The Kelly File and author of the brand new book, Settle for More. Megyn, I'm really glad to have you here.
I am so excited for you, Tucker. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And I'm excited for your book, which is like, it's everywhere, and it's good.
Hopefully.
So I was thinking today, I mean, this has been an amazing journey for you. You were a lawyer in Washington, a well-regarded lawyer, and now, you're one of the most famous people in America, honestly.
Oh, wow.
What's that? No, it's true, though. Has that been bewildering? What's that like?
I don't know. I don't think of myself like that. Honestly, to this day, and I talk about this in the last chapter of Settle for More, when I walk down the street and people are looking at me, I still feel like, I have some in my teeth? What is it? I can't see. I don't know why they're looking at me. It's like I'm not used to people recognizing me yet.
Is that
I also live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and work for Fox News, so those two things could be related. But I don't know. I didn't get into this business for fame or fortune. I actually thought I'd have neither. I mean, I left a well-paying law job to take a job that paid $17,000 a year just because I wanted to change my life.
Yeah.
And that's what you'll do when you smack headfirst into the brick wall of unhappiness. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because I wanted people to see that, we have these great jobs now, and I have a team of people that does this to me. I used to have a much different life, and I used to be a much unhappier person. And I resolved that I could just do better. I just got really honest with myself and did a gut check. And I feel like everybody needs to be reminded that they can do that too. And even if they feel stifled where they are and they feel less than fulfilled, and it's not complete unhappiness, but it's just a malaise, you can change your life. Just make different decisions, and then you have to work your off.
What was the point where you realized you'd succeeded at what you sought to do?
Getting my first full-time TV job offer was thrilling. So I worked part-time for an ABC affiliate in D.C., and then they made me a full-time offer, and I realized I could leave the law permanently. And then I applied to Fox News, and I got my full-time offer here. So that was really exciting. In terms of, success in this industry...
Yeah, when did you feel like, I wanted to do this, and now I've done it?
Well, when they paired me with Hemmer for America's Newsroom, they created that show for us. And this is all actually outlined in the book. And you'll love this, because if you watch Fox News, which obviously you do, it's got a lot of fun stories about Fox News personalities, and Hemmer is one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
I know if you don't like Hemmer, there's something wrong with you.
Everybody likes Hemmer.
Yeah. If you don't get along with Hemmer, it's you. Right?
Totally
He's such a gentleman and such a nice man. And so they paired me with him. We launched America's Newsroom, which went on to be a big success. It was a success right from the beginning. Just the numbers popped right from the start. People loved that product, and still do. And it takes you right through from there forward. And I would say that's the first time I realized, okay, I can do this. I got this.
So what happens when you go back to where you grew up, Albany, and see your high school classmates? What do they say?
They're so sweet. Honestly, I just had a tender moment about it. Can I tell you something really tender? This just happened. In the book, I write about being very badly bullied as a 7th grade girl for almost the entire year. And it was brutal. And my mom would say to me, all you need is one. You just need one friend. Because I had been very popular, but the entire group turned on me. And she was right. And at the end of the year, this lovely girl named Heather Shepard came and sat next to me in the lunchroom and invited me to come over, and we listened to Quiet Riot. and before I know it, I had 2, because she brought another friend in. And I feel to this day so grateful to this woman. I don't really still keep in touch with her. I saw her when I went home, which is what made me think of it, to my school. I was being inducted into the Hall of Fame of Bethlehem Central. Perhaps you've heard of it. I'm sure you saw the coverage, which was actually really exciting, I have to tell you. Anyway, she was there. And I just thought to myself, there she is showing up again when I kind of need her. You know how that happens when you reconnect with people who once had real importance in your life? Anyway, she just got the book and she called my mom because they're all both still in Albany, and she said, tell her she helped me too.
That's so nice.
Which I never knew.
But
anyway.
what about the villains in the story? I mean, you're now at a news organization. You could marshal the resources to find every bully from 7th grade and find out what they're doing now. Have you done that?
I believe that forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. And there may be others who get residual benefits once you do. The bullies are on that list.
I think it's a really deep point. Megyn Kelly, thank you for coming on. Congratulations on the book, which is like shooting to the top.
Thank you. You're kicking butt.
Thank you, Megyn. We wanted you to know that what was the most pompous thing you heard lately? We asked you to tell us our day in pomposity, and you sent a ton of answers. We're going to read the best next.
I think that was your moment right there.
I think it was. And now, drum roll please, we present Today in Pomposity. We asked you to tell us the most remarkably pompous thing you have heard recently, and you responded in force. D. Zappella tweeted, quote, Obama saying people believe he's done a pretty good job. Can you imagine? Notice he says that in another country, she points out. Sam says, I saw a college president say the government can't tell them what to do with sanctuary campuses, as if the government doesn't pay for virtually every college in America, and they do. Brent Hall writes this, it's a tough question to answer, but I'm sure it was between 7 and 8 during Tucker Carlson Tonight. Fair enough. I'm trying to keep my pomposity under control. If I'm not succeeding, tweet me or email. Tomorrow, by the way, we start You Choose the News. That's where we ask you what stories we ought to be covering that we aren't, because there are probably a lot of them. So send us an email or tweet us at Tucker Carlson. The email is tuckercarlsontonight@foxnews.com, and we will check it out. That's it for tonight. We hope to get back tomorrow night, Friday night, for another show. Meanwhile, O'Reilly is next, so be sure to watch that. Thanks a lot.